Hello, everyone. This is a video lecture on Harlan Ellison's Repent Harlequin Said, the TikTok Man. Um, this is a science fiction story set in a future society that is dictated by time to the extent that each time a person is late, she or he has time deducted from their lives. When people have used up all their time, they are shut off, or in other words, killed by the state. Before discussing the story, I would briefly like to speak about utopian and dystopian literature. The word utopia was coined by Sir Thomas More for his 1516 book of the same title, Utopia. It derives from the ancient Greek and literally means no place. And utopia more points out its similarity to another ancient Greek word, utopia. Okay, let me stop here. These words are spelled differently, but in English pronounced the same. So the first utopia is Utopia, and then the other one is Eutopia, which means good place. So realistically, utopia should translate into no good place, the understanding that More advocated. However, in modern English, there's a tendency to view a utopia as a perfect society. This change in meaning may result from the fact that in English, utopia, Utopia, no place, and utopia, Eutopia, good place, are pronounced the same. However, most contemporary literary works that feature so called utopias reveal that they are actually dystopian, which is a bad, fearful place. Ellison's story falls into the category of dystopian literature because it points to a fearful aspect of a future society. What good science fiction does is use the future, or in other words, setting, to comment on issues in our current time. Although published in 1965, Ellison's story has relevancy today in terms of how we view time, lateness, and conformity and rebellion. Ellison begins his story with a quotation from American writer Henry David Thoreau's 1849 essay entitled Civil Disobedience. In his essay, Thoreau had essentially argued that individuals should not allow the government to dictate their conscience. If a citizen knows that a government's laws, practices, policies, or so on are morally wrong, then the citizen not only has the right to disobey, but should disobey. Thoreau's ideas have influenced many activists both within and outside of the United States, such as Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., to name a few. I will not read the entire quotation that Ellison gives from Thoreau, but here are some key lines from it that are important to the actual story. So the first one is, quote, "The mass of men serve the state thus, not as men mainly, but as machines with their body," end quote. Then Thoreau then gives a list of professions in which men tend to act according to the government instead of using their own moral compass. However, points out that among that group that there are, and this is another quote, are very few reformers in a great sense, and men, which is italicized, who serve the state with their consciences also, and so necessarily resist it for the most part, and they are commonly treated as enemy by it. So, in other words, Thoreau is drawing this distinction between men who just follow what the government tells them to do, and for Thoreau, those men are machine. On the other hand, there are very few men who follow their conscience and they do what their morality tells them to do, even if it goes against what the state or the government wants them to do. So, what has happened in this society, said in Ellison's story, is that being late has transitioned from a sin to a crime. And also we need to note like the difference between a sin. A sin is something that usually that we associate with a religious organization that tells us that something or type of behavior is wrong. We're not necessarily punished by the law for that, but it's just something that society views as wrong. And then a crime is something where the government steps in. It's like, okay, now this is a crime and you can be punished for it. On page 5 of the story, it gives numerous examples of how society views lateness, such as someone who had an interview at 2:30 p.m. but didn't show up until 5, the timetable for a train, a student who, although is doing well in coursework, is suspended for tardiness, and so on. The story gives all of these examples to show how this society moved from this being an inconvenience to being a sin to being a crime. So many instances of lateness was happening that it became too much. And so the government decided that they needed to do something about it. So they made it inconvenience, a sin, and then they made sin a crime. Um, and while this story is set in the future, our current society is also dictated by time, right? You have due date for schoolwork, the time we need to show up for work, the time our flights are scheduled to depart, and so on. We constantly run by time in our society. Our modern society frowns on lateness, and we who are often late suffer in terms of missing a train, being docked paid for lateness, having a flight delayed, thus throwing off the rest of our schedule. However, lateness in our current society is mainly an inconvenience with minor punishments, if any. So none of us are going to be killed for being late. Um, but in this story, the society is fed up with people being late, so they make it a crime. And the government keeps a time card which documents each time a person is late. And I don't know if employers do this now, but like when I had my very first job, I had a time card. And so whenever I would go in, I would punch the time card to let them know what time I started work, what time I took my break, what time I took lunches, what time I came back, and what time I left, and that's how my payment was done. I haven't worked a job with a time card in a long time, so I'm not sure that's still done. Um, but in this society, each person has a time card, and then they also have a cardio plate. Um, and the best way for me to explain the cardio plate, let me just give you a quotation from the story when this became a law. This new law in this society goes into effect on July 15, 2389. And here's the quote from the story. In accordance with Statute 555-7-SGH-999, all cardio plates will be keyed to the individual holder, and what they had done was devise a method for curtailing the amount of life a person could have. If he was 10 minutes late, he lost 10 minutes of his life, and so on. So, like if you're 15 minutes late, you lost 15 minutes of your life. If it goes up higher than like an hour, then like they increase the amount of time that you lose from your life. When a person has used up all of her or his time, their time card and cardio plate is turned over to the master timekeeper, who then shuts them off, which is essentially killing them. This law results in a conflict between two men who are at the heart of the story. There's the master timekeeper. This is his official name, but he's called the TikTok man behind his back because he's in charge of keeping the system running on time. Referring back to the opening Thoreau quotation, the master timekeeper, TikTok man, is more machine than he is man, and that he merely serves the state. He stands 6 feet tall, is often silent, and softly purrs when things are going well time-wise. The second man is known as the Harlequin, whose real name is Everett C. Marm. A harlequin is a mute character in traditional pantomime who's typically dressed in a diamond patterned costume. I have placed a few images in the course document so you can get a better sense of what a harlequin looks like. Modern interpretations can be found in DC Comics if you think of the Joker and if you think of Harley Quinn. Get it? Harley Quinn, Harlequin. And so those are modern day interpretations. Returning once again to Thoreau's civil disobedience quotation, Everett C. Marm, the Harlequin, is one of those few heroes because he serves the state with his conscience. He knows that killing people because of lateness is wrong, so he's purposely late and revolts against the corrupt system. One of the Harlequin's earlier actions in the story is to drop $150,000 worth of jelly beans on a slidewalk. At the time that Ellison wrote this story, I don't think we actually have slidewalks now. So if you've ever been to an airport, like as you're moving between gates, you often have this. Now I can only call it a slidewalk. You step on it and it moves you along. So that's what a slidewalk is. In the story, The Harlequin drops $150,000 worth of jelly bean. Just imagine how many jelly beans that is. Um, the jelly beans clog up the system and sets the schedule back 7 minutes. Now, in our current society, a 7 minute setback is nothing, but in this society, 7 minutes is horrible. And what is also interesting here is that it's jelly beans. I mean, think of how jelly beans are a candy that is often associated with fun, right? We associate jelly beans with Easter, with being children, and that they're just delightful and they're colorful and fun, right? And in fact, in the story, the workers are actually laughing when the jelly beans rain down on them. It is also interesting in this story that we learn that jelly beans haven't been manufactured in this society for the last 100 years, which is kind of telling itself, because who would outlaw jelly beans, right? I mean, what damage do they cause? Maybe if you eat too much candy and teeth, but whatever. But that no one has manufactured jelly beans in this society for over 100 years kind of tells you how little fun there is in this society because of time. The Harlequin constantly engages in these acts of rebellion against the system and has used up all his time and more. However, because he is disguised, and you should also note too, the master timekeeper also has a mask. So both of these men are behind masks. The office of the master timekeeper cannot shut him off because they don't really know who he is. And so one of their main goals is to find out who is the Harlequin, and then that way they can turn him off. Ironically, the person who finally turns him in is a woman by the name of Pretty Alice, who is either his girlfriend or his wife. The story doesn't actually specify their relationship. However, there's a scene in the middle of the story when the Harlequin and Pretty Alice have an argument about his lateness. What is clear is that she is frustrated and annoyed with his constant lateness and him telling her that he will be home by a certain time when they both know that he won't be. And she's just done, right? When Marm is finally brought in, he and the TikTok man have it out. The TikTok man tells him, quote, "You've been late a total of 63 years, 5 months, 3 weeks, 2 days, 12 hours, 41 minutes, 59 seconds, 0.036111 microseconds. You've used up everything you can and more. I am going to turn you off." Defiant to the end, Marm responds, "You have no right to order people around and kill them if they show up late." The TikTok man then says something about Marm not fitting in and calling him a nonconformist because he refuses to obey the rules. For the TikTok man, he views most people as enjoying order and that most people want to fit in. To which Marm says, not the people he knows. And this is when the TikTok man tells him that it was Pretty Alice who turned him in because she wants to belong, she wants to conform. At the end of the day, the master timekeeper decides not to turn off Marm. Instead, he's worked over, and the words in this story are actually worked over. What exactly this means isn't stated, but it can be tortured, brainwashed, reprogrammed to accept the rules of the society. Once whatever they have done to Marm has succeeded, he appears on the communication devices that the society uses. And in that appearance, he says that he had been wrong, that it was good, a very good thing indeed to belong. So the rebellion that Marm had worked for doesn't come to fruition. And this seems like a negative ending to the story, right? However, the story does end with a glimmer of hope. Even though Marm was destroyed, we are told that, and this is a direct quote from the story, "You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. And in every revolution, a few die who shouldn't, but they have to, because that's the way it happens. And if you make only a little change, then it seems to be worthwhile." This change is illustrated in the last scene of the story when the master timekeeper himself is 3 minutes late. When he is told about his lateness, he claims that it is ridiculous and he goes into his office murmuring gibberish in the way the Harlequin might have. So even though Mom Harlequin is destroyed, there's this sense that he got to the master timekeeper and change will come. In this lecture, I've not gone over the story in detail in terms of plot summary or given every aspect of it. And also the way that Ellison tells the story, it's not in chronological order. So he moves back and forth and it doesn't fit into just one, this happened and this happened and then this happened. There are little scenes that he includes that kind of gives you an overview of this society and what Marm Harlequin is up against. What I have highlighted is the issues in this story, which are essentially society's views on time and lateness and the issue of conformity and rebellion. You can see in the story how the master timekeeper and Everett C. Marm represent the two men that Thoreau alludes to in Civil Disobedience quotation, and how the story revolves around a man, Marm, the Harlequin, who is willing to rebel when his conscience and morality will not allow him to follow blindly the rest of society. This is a very interesting, very fascinating story. As I said before, this lecture hasn't gone over it in detail or in chronological order, so you want to make sure that you do read the story for yourself. After you read the story and listen to this video lecture, if you have any questions about the story, if anything is unclear, you need anything explained, please feel free to email me and I'll be happy to address any of those issues or concerns that you have concerning this story. Okay, take care and I hope you enjoy the story. Bye.